Buenas noches. Buen provecho. Excelente cena. ¿Cuántos hablan aquí español? Bien, porque yo no sé hablar inglés, así que a ver cómo nos entendemos. First of all, thank you very much, World Affairs Council. Thank you very much, Council. Thank you very much, Los Angeles, California, and United States, for letting us here. Sometimes I think that I'm going to lose my visa. And really, a lot of people tell me that. Watch out. But fortunately, I have a daughter here. She's becoming an Angelina. My daughter, Paulina.
Be careful.
That's what she warns me about. And she gifted me with 2 grandsons, which are right here also. And I think their plan is to stay here for long. And they're having a great time here. And this city has welcomed them pretty well. We spoke about Ireland. I come from migrant families on both sides. And by the way, every single one of you here, unless you are Native Americans, you also have a migrant heritage. And this nation has been built all along by migrants. And that's why, one of the reasons why it's so successful. So let me to introduce and get to the issue we're going to talk about, the relationship between Mexico and the United States. I'd like to go back, way, way back, millions of years ago, when at that time human beings were hunters or were gatherers. They moved along freely around the world, either catching rabbits or getting fruit or vegetables from earth. But soon after, somebody discovered, and maybe this is the first great step forward on technology, planting seeds to produce harvest crops of different fruits for human beings. And this nomad civilization started to settle down in communities, forming cities. But at the same time, and the motor that began moving, creating wealth in the world, creating jobs and income, creating opportunities was trading. So all these communities, all these cities began to trade with each other. That time there was not even currency. They were just exchanged. And they didn't care so much about determining what the cost of production of my goods were or the goods that I was going to get from somebody else. You exchanged what you had in excess for what you needed the most. It didn't matter if it was a trade of $1 to $1. Everybody won because you had what you wanted and you placed your excess of production. And that's the way the world went further and more to cities, into nations, and from nations into the communities that we have today. And once we spread out and we became 200 nations or economies, then we decided to do our work better and understanding that none of us are self-sufficient. Even this powerful, great land and economy of America is not self-sufficient. You have to exchange, and we have to exchange. So we started then getting together adding our capacities, compensating our lack of some important skills, and then we conform blocks. One of the first blocks created, of course, was the European Union, based on trade. And the whole agreement of the European Union is trading. And it is one for all and all for one. And with the support of the United States and the Marshall Plan, they recuperated from war, and they became highly successful nations and economies. Today, they enjoy the highest per capita of income in the world, even larger than United States. Today, they enjoy the best, the very best distribution of income that exists in the world, maybe only equiparable to the ones in Asia. Extremely good distribution of income. The gap between the rich and the poor is so important. The gap in this nation or in Latin America is from the roof to the bottom, between those who have and those who don't enjoy the goods of this earth. So that's what happened with trading. It is the motor, the engine that moved creating wealth around the world. This then takes me to our case in Mexico and United States. We went through the same process. We in Mexico come from ancient, millenarian civilizations. Way, way, way back. And the Aztecs used to trade with the Mayas, and the Mayas with the other communities, and even with the rest of Central America and else. Finally, we were conquered, and finally we became independent. Exactly the same story of this nation. And exactly, and basically at the same time, when President Washington was on the horse fighting for independence, fighting with the French and the Britons, Padre Hidalgo was riding the horse in Mexico, fighting the Spaniards and attaining independence. And same happened with Bolivar down south and everybody. Well, that took us where we are today. We even had a war between Mexico and United States. Pancho Villa came with 20 warriors with their guns shooting and got into U.S. territory. And same, a U.S. general came all the way down to Veracruz on that war that we have between us. But later on, we learned that we're neighbors, that we have to work together, that we're friends, and we decided to partner. And we decided to partner because we had a dream together, Canada, Mexico, and United States. We dreamed that we could do much better, and this was 25 years ago. And we dreamed by joining we could become the largest economic bloc in the world, and that we could become the largest consumer market in the world, and that we could be together leading this world, this Western civilization. And that's what happened, and we've been very successful in our dream. Tell you one indicator. 25 years ago, you would make of income in the Mexican side working, let's say the equivalent of $1, when by learning how to swim or how you jump walls, you would be making $10. Which human being can resist that incentive? That from day one to day two to tomorrow, you move from $1 income to $10 income. So that's really the problem that we have. The problem of the United States is success. So successful that you attract people to come here. The problem of Mexico is yet lack of opportunities and the desire to do better for us and for our families. And that's what has been happening. But NAFTA is fulfilling the dream, because 24 years after today, the gap is 5-1. So the incentive has reduced to half. And at the same time, Mexico has created opportunities, expanded opportunities to reach all people in Mexico. Today, we have regions in Mexico that are full employment, absolutely full employment, like is the center of Mexico. The states of Querétaro, Guanajuato, San Luis Potosí, Aguascalientes. And they are growing the economy at rates of 6, 7, and up to 10%. This part of Mexico now is growing faster than China itself. And that's the consequence, that's what we got out of NAFTA. And that's what should be pleasing this nation. Because who wants a poor neighbor? Who wants a neighbor in need? Who wants a neighbor in violence? You work with your neighbor. You try to improve. You try to reduce that gap. Look at the success in Europe. I mean, today, per capita incomes and quality of life in Spain, in Portugal, in Greece, in Italy, has closed the gap and reached almost the levels and standards of living of Britain, of Germany, of France. So the miracle happens. And staying together, we can still go much further. So this is what we have today. But all of a sudden, today is very popular in business. Disrupt, change, innovate. And so this nation elected a disruptor, not to say a destroyer. And so we have him now leading this nation. And yes, we can accommodate, we can find out how we can keep this solid friendship, partnership, and neighboring that we have together. How we can keep the dream going. And I think it's feasible. But sometimes we don't understand the idea of a wall. Great idea, he says. And it's going to be great, big, beautiful, like you've never seen before. It's going to be transparent. What for? Why are you going to spend $35 billion? You can pay teachers of the whole of the world for 2 years with that money. Imagine how many universities you can build. Imagine how many changes you can do in technology, in health and education, in manufacturing, in production. There are so many other alternatives. But anyway, all nations are sovereign, and Mexico respects that. If you want a wall, build it. If you want to waste your money, waste it. But be sure, we are not paying for that fucking wall. That is our right. And that's what we're going to do. Imagine the Mongols and the Manchus when the Chinese people came and told them, I'm going to build a wall because I need protection from you. What would the Mongols and Manchus would have said to pay for the wall that the Chinese are going to be building? No way. Then, what happened immediately? They build this great wall. And what happened is that the Mongols and the Manchus jumped the wall and conquered China. And same thing happened with Gorbachev. He decides to build a wall in Berlin. And what happened with that wall? Here comes President Reagan, a Californian on horse, and shouts loud and clear, Mr. Gorbachev, tear off that wall. And here we are again. Some guys that don't read history wanted to repeat the same mistakes. But let's go to trade. Why trade wars? If this nation started trading right from the very beginning, way before President Washington, President Lincoln, and independence, way before this nation was eager to trade with Europe. And you started producing tobacco, producing cotton, and whatever you could sell to Europe. And that's the only way this nation was nourished with the income necessary to start building and to start progressing. This nation is a nation of traders. And this nation took us, the rest of the world, to open our borders. When Coca-Cola saturated the U.S. market, they needed to go and expand the business. So they came to Mexico to knock the door. Let me bring in Coca-Cola. No, I have my aguas frescas. And then comes McDonald's. I want to sell you. Let me get into the Mexican market. If we have our tacos and our tortas, what do we want hamburgers for? We opened our market. China opened their markets. Europe opened their markets, mostly for U.S. corporations' benefit, for global U.S. corporations. But we learned the lesson. We opened our markets. We opened our borders. And believe me, it was difficult. Imagine Mexico with our costly output, low yield of grain, sorghum, wheat. We couldn't, and we knew we were not be able to compete with a great, massive grain production of the United States. And we were afraid, and we didn't want to go to NAFTA. But in a way, we were forced, we were convinced by our leaders in Mexico, and we went for the challenge. And then we learned that we had to compete. And when we learned that we had to develop the human capital, that we had to be productive, that we had to be competitive. And we just got into the U.S. market, got into markets in the rest of the world. And today we're accused of taking jobs away from U.S. economy. We're not robbers or stealers. We gained our capacity to compete. And this nation can do the same. The old carbon jobs are never going to come back. Automobile industry is never going to be competitive unless you bring salaries to 1/3 of the salaries workers are gaining here in the United States. They went broke for General Motors, Chrysler, because they couldn't compete. And taxpayers' money had to rescue them with billions and billions of dollars. This happened recently. I don't know why don't we read history. Or some guy doesn't read history. Now he's saying, General Motors, Chrysler, Ford, come back, and you're going to produce your cars in the United States. That will not happen because the production of automobiles in India, in Japan, in Europe, is most competitive. And they will take the market immediately. And further on, this nation, under the leadership of President Hoover, he came out with 2 public policies, international. One, no more going out to invest and produce. Do it here in the United States, he told U.S. corporations. And number 2, to defend and save the jobs in the United States, he said, we're going to tax imports so that I protect the jobs here. It's a wrong decision. Economy doesn't move like that. It's different. Every action has a reaction. Every decision has consequences. And what happened with President Hoover's policies? The big depression of last century. And that's what could happen this time. So the world is flat, the world is open. We must compete in that arena or we will not survive. And this is what Mexico is pursuing, and our hope is that we will come with a better NAFTA. And what's a better NAFTA? The one that President Bush, his administration, my administration, the House of Representatives here, the Senate, Senator McCain, Senator Kennedy, presented to Congress. It's an all-comprehensive proposal to solve the right way the issue of migration and the issue of the borders. And it's been sitting there in U.S. Congress 10 years now, and it has not been processed. There is a clear solution there for undocumented people here. At that time, we were talking about 11 million. We keep talking about 11 million. Nobody knows how many they are. But most everybody knows that they're productive, that they're good people, that they're looking for a better life. And it's stated there, we don't want open borders. Mexico accepted the challenge. No open borders. Let's put that border in order. And it's accepted and signed by Mexico, that commitment. So there is this great gift that we all have: wisdom, intelligence, capacity to discuss, capacity to negotiate, to sit on a table and see how we solve problems. Or better said, how we fix problems. One person doesn't fix problems. Problems are fixed by teamwork. Problems are fixed by joint brain and joint capacities. And yes, we can do that. And Mexico is willing to sit down. But when you're called rapists, criminals, when you want to kick us out of here, like he said, what is your reaction? As we have said publicly, we're already dealing with China, with Russia. Mexico didn't have trade agreement with China. Now we're working the TPP. And then already our authorities already went to Argentina, to Brazil, to see the market of grain, the prices. And prices are much lower than what we buy here in the United States. And we buy 40 billion US dollars worth of grain that feeds and sustains hundreds of thousands of farmers in the United States. And we buy another 40 billion of milk products, cheese, of meat. Where are you going to sell that? Mexico buys that from this nation. Automobile industry, 40% of every car manufactured in Mexico is integrated by 40% of auto parts and pieces brought from United States. So it's one single industry that has become very competitive and that is yielding and creating wealth for the three of our nations. So what is the future? The future is that we use common sense, that we use wisdom, intelligence, that we discuss NAFTA. And one proposal I took to President Peña is, why don't you bring to Trump what he's looking for, what he mentioned? He wants salaries in Mexico to be raised. Let's give him that. It's good for Mexico. I'm totally in favor of that. How can you do it? There are ways to do it without affecting the competitiveness of the Mexican companies or the joint competitiveness that transnational, global U.S. corporations enjoy out of Mexico. They are resistant to pay higher salaries in Mexico. Today, at your farm in San Cristobal, the family is paying more than what GM is paying on the production line to the people harvesting the vegetables that we sell here. And there are many, many examples of how we can use our brains to keep being partners, to keep competing with other economies that are really taking the pie away. Nobody has mentioned, for instance, India and its IT industry. They're masters on information technologies. They are masters on call centers. They are masters on processing account and financial statements. Thousands, millions of Indians or Hindus work on this industry, working for U.S. companies. Nobody has questioned how many jobs this nation has lost there. On the contrary, it's a very strong benefit to use that brain and bring it to increase and enhance the productivity and competitiveness of corporations here. Dalai Lama, he made a comment also. He never mentioned who was he thinking of. But he said, the world belongs to humanity, not to individuals, not to nations. The world is the home of 8 billion people. And we have the same right, and we're here for the same purpose, to build a better world. And then he continued, nations belong to their citizens. They don't belong to individuals to do whatever they want. They don't belong to Maduro or to Chavez, Venezuela. That they have appropriated a nation to comply with their own selfish vision, obsolete vision of development. And we have suffered those gorillas and those dictators and those messianic leaders and those demagogues and those populists in Latin America for the whole of the 20th century. Every nation in Latin America, you name it, was run by a dictator, by a populist, by a demagogue, all along. And then we question today why we didn't progress as other regions of the world or other nations progress. Because we expected everything from the dictator. They promised us, you have fear, I'm going to build walls. You don't have a job, I'm going to bring jobs to you. Don't worry, sit down. I'm going to get everything for you. Your kids want to go to school, I will build the schools. You need hospitals, I will build and provide the hospitals to you. We became lazy. We had like morphine. We just sat down and said, Jesus, how wonderful this is. They're going to give us everything in Brazil, in Argentina, in Uruguay, in Mexico, everywhere. And here we are, lagging way, way behind other regions of the world. You cannot kill personal, private, individual initiative, innovation, entrepreneurship. You cannot bring in with imposed answers to every family in this nation, telling them, I can do it, I can fix it, I will make America great. Again? It's always been great. You're not starting. So this is what I call false prophets. It is a dangerous situation. We have our own false prophet in Mexico riding the horse very fast. Our Lopitos, López Obrador. And we have to watch out, and we have to be careful, because he is a Maduro, he is a Chavez, he is a Castro. But with populism, you can sell, you can promise. And unfortunately, people on his ignorance, unfortunately, people on his poverty, you get close to these false prophets. In Mexico, we learned the lesson. I don't think that we're going to fall again back into that we already had in the past. I come here, half Mexican, half American. This from Spain, this from Ireland. I'm a blend, I'm a mix. And I love everybody, I love this nation. My grandfather was born here in Cincinnati, Ohio. He came down to Mexico, he rode a horse, he took a train, he crossed borders, desert, and he came to Mexico without a penny in his pocket. and he found his dream there. Same as hundreds of thousands of US citizens today are in China, are in Brazil, are in Mexico, are in Europe, are everywhere, migrating to other countries. We have to be open, we have to be compassionate, we have to have love for others, we have to take care of those who don't have the chances and the opportunities, and that's the way to build a better world. So to me, leadership has an adjective, and it's compassionate. Leaders that don't have love and compassion don't transcend. And we have many examples of those, like Hitler, like Napoleon, like Castro, like Maduro. The other leaders, the leaders that love, the leaders that have a commitment, the leaders that share and live for others, they transcend. They will be in history forever. The Mandelas, the Martin Luther Kings, the Lev Walesas, the et cetera, those who defeated empires, those who changed the world with compassion, with their word, with their spirit, and that's the ones that we'll remember, and we will remember forever. So I really think this great nation, fortunately, lives by democracy and has checks and balances. And that's a good seal and protection. That's a good umbrella. But what about citizens? Citizens have to speak, has to take a trench. Ford or GM should say, President, if you force me to produce here, I'm going to lose market share. I'm not going to make the profits for my customers. We have to speak or suffer the consequences. Thank you.
So President Fox will take some questions. Alexander has the microphone here. If you just put up your hand, and he will get to you in the course of walking around the room.
Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for being here. We appreciate your time. I've heard some feedback from entrepreneurs, mostly in Jalisco, about just challenges with business with the current Trump administration. What's your supportive response to them in their fear about business suffering from the current U.S. administration?
I don't think the bad things that we contemplate are going to happen. And maybe good things are going to happen with him. For instance, this tax reform, I think it's a great opportunity for this nation. The great opportunity to mobilize the economy, energize it, and put it at high speed. With a good tax reform, you can attain that objective. But there is one more important objective, much more important that you can do through a tax change, which is distribution of income. So it has to be one of the principles that that reform must have. How can you explain your own people or people outside of the world that this powerful nation with a strong economy that it has cannot provide health care services to each and every one of its citizens? I cannot explain that in any way. I don't know how do you do it. You do it Obama way, or you do it Trump way, or you do it US way, whatever. But it's unfair that that matter is not covered. All of Europe, the 30 and some nations, every single citizen has 100% Medicare at a very high quality. Every single citizen has it. In Mexico, you don't believe, but with the creation of Seguro Popular, every family in Mexico today has Medicare. It could be not of the quality enough that is required, but the service is provided and is for all Mexican families. And many countries have solved this, and this nation has to solve it, and it can solve it. The tax reform should be addressed to make sure that whatever the cost is, every family, every kid, every person in this nation has health coverage. So I think it's a great opportunity. The things that can come, especially through the tax reform, and also the change, the Obama care and Medicare. Why to repeal? Why not to sit down with the Democrats, with Congress, and say, this is wrong, we can change this, and build up a totally new system? Why should be the choice either blue or either red? That, forgive me, is stupid. And this nation is suffering, going through the same things that all nations were going through. We don't reach agreements. Democracy was not created to fight like dogs and cats. It was not created to impose my dogma over the other. It was not created to discard any ideas coming from the other. We have to be over and above that. Look at Asia. Asia left dogmas and ideologies back in the 20th century. They are pragmatic governments. They run pragmatic elections. Who can come with the best idea to create jobs? Who can come with the best idea to create wealth? Who can come with the best ideas to trade more, or to educate better, or to develop in technology and innovation? That's the game in Asia, and that's why they prosper and they are running so fast. The right, the left is forgotten there. The progressive and the conservative, forgotten there. It's no more prevalent. And I have to say this, what you find there, for instance, in China, is a 5-year plan. It's what we do in business. It's a business plan. And it's run with discipline, and they follow the plan and the path. They don't change when they change government. They don't invent the wheel every time that government is changed. So I think we have way more options than what we see outside. And this North America has to keep being the leader region on the world. Even leader on ideas, on spirituality, on beliefs. Because what will happen if that center of gravity is transferred to the East? Which are going to be the prevailing values if the Western values that have been in this part of the world such a long time? So we have a lot to protect. We have a lot to do and to grow.
Welcome to Los Angeles. Could you tell me what happened between you and Venezuela?
No, look, we live so happy and so in love, Martha and I, there in our little place, in our wonderful little world of San Cristobal, which is our Tara, like Gone with the Wind. That's paradise for us. But I get involved when they don't call me. And it's principles again. It's values. I cannot see those millions and millions of Venezuelans suffering what they are suffering and going through what they are going through. And it's just because there is democracy not existing there, freedom is not existing there, respect of human rights is not existing there, and I just can't accept that. So I went to Venezuela, and it was the greatest experience I have had since year 2000 in Mexico. It's incredible, the feast, the party of 7.5 million Venezuelans out on the street, going to vote, going to care for their nation. It was really incredible joy. And when they reached the peak and almost ready for the change, still the dictator, still the false prophet, controlled back again. And unfortunately, today, just a couple of months after, opposition is divided. And it's divided under a dilemma that I think is very important to comment here. The dilemma and the question is, do we go to an election called by government, controlled by government, administrated by government? Or we don't appear and left the empty space there for the gorilla? That crucial dilemma presented in Mexico around 1980. And the decision of my party, which was a 50-50 decision, finally gained the decision, let's participate. No matter that we lose, no matter that it's fraud, no matter that whatever happens, let's be present, let's fight for our country. If you abandon, then it's difficult to come back again. And that's one of the key things, and I'm sorry that I answer with different themes, but that's a crucial decision of this nation. Building a wall, isolating, renouncing to the leadership that this nation has had all over the world for now 100 years. Who is going to fill up that space? Who is going to take over? If the nation says, I don't care, you solve your problems, I'm going to build a strong North America. Renouncing to that leadership is about the same dilemma than renouncing to go to elections by the Venezuelans. It's dangerous to renounce to your obligations.
Buenas noches, Presidente Fox.
Hola.
I'm going to be speaking in 2 languages, so I'm really sorry. Pero, ¿qué es tu opinión por lo que está pasando con los niños that they're being taken away from their families, especially after the huge influx of narcotraficantes que han pasado en México? The reason I ask about this is because in 2011, my cousin was murdered in Mexico due to the fact that he did not want to export drugs and his company did not want to comply. So as opposed to like the Trump views and a lot of his supporters who think that all of Mexicanos are drug dealers when some of them are being murdered and killed because they don't want to cooperate. What would you say to those people, especially the families that have been fleeing Mexico, to go ahead and seek sanctuary from the United States and are now being taken away back by ICE forces and all things like that?
When I was with the students a while ago, I returned the question to them. And I told them, why do you think Mexico is in such a world of violence, homicides, and killing? What is the reason for that? Because many people think, what's going on with these Mexicans? Are they going crazy? Are they drinking too much tequila? What's happening with them? Let me tell you, the problem is here. The problem is this $55 billion raised by cartels every year selling drugs in the United States, the largest consumer in the world by far. In Mexico, we don't produce drugs significantly. We don't consume drugs significantly. Drugs come from the south, from Colombia, from Venezuela, from Ecuador, from Bolivia. And Mexico is used as transit. And we've been doing our very best trying to control that traffic and stop it before it reaches the border with the United States. That drug doesn't come to supply the Mexican market. As I said, we don't consume drugs. So we're here doing a job for this nation, for the youth of this nation, because we think it's our obligation to do it. And yes, in the President Calderon administration, we had 85,000 kids killed out on the streets by the army. And it was wrong, very wrong, to bring the army to that battle, because it's become more radical, the confrontation is worse, and crime rate moved from 9 crimes for each 100 inhabitants, December 2006, my last year on the administration, and it went up to 28. It tripled because of the presence of the Army. And those kids were not born criminals, as I told these great kids here. They didn't have the opportunities they had. In Mexico, only 3 out of 10 kids have the opportunity to be in a university. Those 80,000 killed, they wanted to go to school. They tried to get a scholarship, and they didn't get it. Or they were looking for a job, no job. And the cartels offered them the job. I have an estimated figure of 100,000 kids working for the cartels today. And they're paying better salaries than GM in the production line. So it's difficult to compete with the power of those cartels, the economic power of those cartels. They have big, efficient, organized teams to work for them. So it's something that I have said publicly. One day will come when a Mexican president will come and tell this nation, okay, you don't want drugs in the United States? You take care of it. Why should I do it for you? Why don't you build a wall and don't let the drug cross to the United States? Why the drug crosses? And they say, well, you Mexicans, you bring it in and you smuggle it in. And I say, why don't you Americans stop the drug? Right there on the border, where's the CIA, where is the DEA, where are all the security agencies, where are they? The drug moves from Ciudad Juarez to Washington, to New York, to Chicago. So it's a big problem that we have. Again, that should be included in NAFTA negotiations. And that's what President Bush administration and mine came about. We said, okay, let's include the security part in the deal. So we came out with something that is called NAFTA Plus, Partnership for Trading and Prosperity. And that should be included there. Because Mexico does much more than what this nation knows about your own security. We are protecting this nation against terrorism. We are very eager and very clear that we have to work on that. And that's what we work on. And terrorism will not come, has not come through Mexico to United States. That's one advantage that we should build up also in NAFTA. We should come to an agreement. As I said before, let's include salaries there and force Mexico to increase salaries. Because the first ones that don't want to pay those salaries are the US corporations that benefit by manufacturing in Mexico. So a lot of issues can be included and negotiated in NAFTA, and I hope reason prevails. I hope that those that are sitting in that table have the same vision that the original founders of NAFTA had, that it can be the greatest tool that we can have among our 3 nations to be successful in economy, in jobs, and in wealth creation.